Hello, my name is Amanda Moore. I'm the director of the Clearinghouse Community. Welcome to the Advocacy Exchange for September 2016. The Advocacy Exchange, which was formerly known as Shriver Hangouts, is our monthly conversation with advocates advancing change. So both the Advocacy Exchange and the Clearinghouse Community are brought to you by the Sargent Shriver National Center on Poverty Law, a national leader in advancing justice and opportunity. Today, I'm joined by three guests. I'd like to welcome them in turn now. I've got Sarah Summers here. Sarah is the managing attorney at the National Health Law Program, and she's joining us today from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
I'm also joined by my colleague, Jennie Sutcliffe. Jennie's the director of the Juvenile Justice Initiative at the Shriver Center, and Jennie's joining us today from Ithaca, New York. Hi, Jennie.
Hello, all.
And also, I'm joined by Katy Welter. Katy's a former senior policy analyst at the Chicago Appleseed Fund for Justice. And Katy's joining us from Buena Vista, Colorado. Hi, Katy.
Hello, all.
Now, my three guests wrote our current Clearinghouse article, which is called Unlocking the Affordable Care Act's Potential for Justice-Involved Individuals. You can find that article, if you'd like to read it, at the website here below, which is povertylaw.org/clearinghouse. We'll use their article as a starting point for our conversation today about the intersection of the Affordable Care Act and the criminal justice system. Before we get into that, though, I want to address a couple of housekeeping matters. One is that we would love to hear from you. We want your questions. If this is something that you've worked on, we want to hear from you about your experience. There are a couple of ways that you can let us hear from you. One is, if you are watching us through the YouTube live stream, which I think everyone is, depending on your device that you're using, you should see a chat box down the side of your screen. You can send us questions that way. Or if you prefer old, reliable methods of communication, you can send an email to me here at amandamoore@povertylaw.org. I'll be monitoring my email during our conversation. And if you send me your question, I'll be sure to pass it along to our guests. One more thing. This is being recorded, and afterward, everyone who registered for this event will receive a follow-up email, and that email will contain a link to today's recording of this conversation, and also a link, the one below, to my guest's article. So you'll be sure to get that afterward. It should probably come within the next couple of days. All right, if you want to go ahead and try out the ways to send us a question, feel free. You can send us just your name and where you're watching. We'd love to hear from you. We'll go ahead and get started, though, talk about the actual business at hand. Sarah, I'd like to start with you. Before we get into the actual tips for advocates on this, I'd like to lay the groundwork. Most of our viewers come from the civil side of the legal world. So can you paint us the picture of the criminal justice system? How many people are we talking about? Where in the system are they, and what are their health needs?
All right, so there are more than 2 million adults who are incarcerated on any given day, according to the most recent figures from the Department of Justice. And there are another, close to 5 million who are on probation or parole. Now, most of the people who come into the system are people who are cycling in and out of the jails, people who aren't going to stay, more than a few days. And a lot of that number includes people who are in and out. Maybe only a third of jail inmates are actually serving a sentence after being convicted. And it's widely recognized that the justice-involved population has, higher rates of chronic conditions and substance use and mental health disorders than the rest of the population. Maybe, up as more than half of state prison inmates report some kind of mental health problem. And of course, prisoners are several times more likely to show signs of, psychosis, major depression, other types of mental illness. It's sort of a catch-22 because part of the reason that many people are cycling in and out of the jails is because they have chronic mental health problems that are untreated, chronic substance use issues that are untreated, and at the same time, being incarcerated exacerbates emotional problems, behavioral problems. So it's a very high needs population. Um, one of one of the things people don't think about too, and Jenny's here to reinforce that for us, is the extent of juveniles, the mental health problems and substance use problems and emotional problems that the juveniles who are incarcerated and who are just generally justice involved are experiencing. So again, a very high needs population in great need of ongoing treatment.
So what do we know about their health insurance status? What kind of health insurance is this population eligible for? Do we know if most people have some type of health insurance who are in the criminal justice system?
Right. So generally speaking, most people are uninsured. And so let's start dividing people into categories. There are people who are actually incarcerated who've been convicted of a crime. And then there are people who are part of the population that's on probation, parole, or cycling in and out. So let's just talk about people who are in jail who've been convicted. Those folks are eligible for services that are provided through the correction system. Those are the services that they have access to, whether it be the state system, the county, and it's widely recognized that the quality of prison health care and jail health care and juvenile detention-oriented health care is poor and underfunded. Of necessity, because people are cycling in and out, any kind of meaningful treatment for mental health or substance use is not going to be successful because of the lack of continuity. Okay, so let's take looking at the people who are at risk of incarceration, people who are coming out of incarceration, or people who are on probation or parole. Those people can be eligible for Medicaid, and they can be eligible for policies that are sold on the health exchange. Let's talk about Medicaid, because the vast majority of these people are going to be eligible for Medicaid if they're eligible for any kind of insurance. Medicaid covers low-income people. It covers people who are under age 18, which includes a lot of juveniles, are eligible up to 138% of the federal poverty level. In states that have expanded Medicaid, adults who have incomes under 138% of the federal poverty level, if they're citizens and live in the state, are eligible for Medicaid coverage. So this gives you an opportunity for, many opportunities for people who are at risk of incarceration, people you're trying to transition out of incarceration, or people who should be diverted from incarceration. If they can be covered by Medicaid, Medicaid covers a variety of substance use treatment services, mental health services, and the services for juveniles are even more expansive. Okay, so that's the Medicaid story. The marketplace story is you can be eligible to buy a policy, an individual policy on the health insurance exchange in your state if you're 100% of poverty or over, or 138, depending on some deviation in the state. But that next echelon of people who have a little bit more money than Medicaid. This isn't going to be a lot of people, because if you're cycling in and out of jail, then most likely you're not going to be able to have an income in order to get you over that level. But that doesn't mean that nobody is. And so you can be eligible to buy one of these policies if you are out of jail, or even if you're in jail pending disposition of charges. So that's a difference in Medicaid. Medicaid, it's binary, in, out, except for some limited circumstances. In the marketplace, they make an exception for people who are innocent until proven guilty. So there's a lack of continuity. And just to make it the final detail that everyone needs to know about this is we've been talking very loosely about eligibility for Medicaid. This is actually not quite correct. You can be eligible for Medicaid even if you're incarcerated. The problem is Medicaid funds can't cover Medicaid services in the prison or the jail. See the distinction? So if your state would allow it, if I went to jail tomorrow, if North Carolina allowed it, I could continue to be eligible for Medicaid. Now, none of my services could be covered, but the reason is there's an incentive for states to do it is because if you're hospitalized off-site, then Medicaid could pay for it. So, Amanda, do you think I've lost people on this? This is
I think I'm following. I want to confirm that I understand. So if I'm in Tennessee, let's say I have Medicaid already in place, I go into the system, it remains in place, right? I've got my Medicaid throughout. And then if I'm taken off-site for a hospital stay, Medicaid's going to cover what services I get while I'm there. And then when I come out of the system, I'm still going to have my Medicaid coverage.
Yes, and you can start services without losing the continuity. There's no reason federally states can't do this. Many states don't because they're afraid of getting in trouble for misbilling or because of ease of administration or being set in their ways. But it's a very big missed opportunity. So since we're focusing on advocacy tips, number one missed opportunity, expand Medicaid. Can I say that? Is that too political?
You can say that.
At least
I actually thought about that when I said I'm in Tennessee, and I started to think, well, I can have Medicaid as long as I'm not in the gap, right?
I was just going to say,
yeah.
So us sad folks in North Carolina and Tennessee, we do not have Medicaid expansion, but in Colorado and New York, the other folks on the call, there is a Medicaid expansion. So that's number one. Number two, maintain or even just suspend eligibility when people are actually incarcerated for a period of time, because that enables a quicker transition. It gives judges more options when you're trying to let people out early. And finally, if indeed you need to be hospitalized, then Medicaid can pay for it. So, to recap, millions of sick people in need of health services are cycling in and out of jails and in prisons. And there are some, God forbid I use this phrase, low-hanging fruit for states to take advantage of to give these people better care.
All right. Thank you so much, Sarah, for painting that picture for us. Let's talk, Sarah, if you wouldn't mind muting your mic right now. Thanks. So now let's talk about what advocates can do, how they can access people who are in the criminal justice system to get them covered in some way that Sarah described. So the article that you wrote, which as I mentioned is here at povertylaw.org/clearinghouse, you talk about 3 points in the criminal justice system, and you call them intercepts, where advocates can check on health insurance status, and it makes sense at these 3 points. So those 3 are at the initial detention, at sentencing, and at reentry. So let's take those in turn and talk about the advocacy points there at those intercepts. Jennie, I'll start with you, and we'll start with detention. What can we do about insurance coverage at that point?
So as Sarah mentioned, there's a significant number of people who actually cycle in and out of county jails. So there's a far higher chance of touching populations at county jails than there necessarily are actually in Department of Corrections settings. So that's a fabulous place to even sort of start by checking someone's status. There's a lot of different initiatives that you can look to around the country that do this. Cook County's been doing this for quite a while, where they check someone's Medicaid eligibility when they come in the door. If they don't already have coverage, they actually initiate and start a Medicaid application for that person. Rikers Island is another correctional setting that does this. They've sort of done it a little bit differently, where they sort of focus on folks who are HIV positive and have significant or serious mental illness. So they check their status and do their applications as part of detention. And you can do this both in the booking stage, as somebody is sort of coming in the door as part of the intake process, or even as part of reentry. That's what Denver does, for example. They do a pre-screening at booking, and then when somebody's reentering into the community, if they don't already have coverage, they start an application at that point. So it's really important, we talked about continuity of care there for folks who are cycling in and out of jail, and we know that they remain eligible, as we just covered. So really making sure that folks who aren't enrolled become enrolled, and folks who are eligible stay enrolled and have a warm handoff to the appropriate healthcare setting, once they're released out of a county jail.
Thanks, Jennie. And I want to remind our viewers that we would like to hear from you. If you have questions for Jennie, Katy, and Sarah, please let us hear those. You can email me at the address on your screen, which is Amanda Moore, MOORE, at povertylaw.org. Or if you're watching through YouTube and you see the chat box there, you can send us a question that way as well. Right, let's turn to the second intercept now, which is sentencing. Katy, I'll turn to you. What can we do about health insurance coverage at sentencing?
Thanks, Amanda. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of a sentencing project that I was involved in, the Access to Community Treatment Court. The Access to Community Treatment Court is a problem-solving court in Cook County, Illinois, that really made as its focus being a community first and healthcare reform focused problem solving court, and it's designed for individuals who are substance dependent, and as it turned out, the vast majority of those individuals had not had access to health insurance in the past. So one of the things the ACT Court did to begin with was build on the work that Jennie mentioned with jail enrollment. So the majority of the clients had been enrolled, at least had their application begun in the jail. So the first thing we did with the ACT Court is follow up on that and make sure that if an application was open, that it was completed, or if it hadn't been started, that the application was filed. The next kind of point to make about sentencing is that, as Sarah mentioned, there's a huge incentive to, the ACA creates a huge incentive to treat justice-involved individuals in the community rather than in a penal institution, which is why the ACT Court took a community-first approach, meaning all individuals were treated in community-based settings. And
Okay. Sarah, you look like you are still with us. Jennie, you're with us. Katy, are you with us? I think maybe we've just lost Katy. Okay, well, hopefully she will be back with us. Let's turn to the final intercept. And if Katy comes back, we can talk about, let her finish talking about the ACT Court in Chicago, which is a really incredible program. But we'll turn to the final intercept, which is reentry. There's a lot of focus now on the challenges of reentry, legal barriers to successful reentry, opportunities to improve chances of successful reentry. Jennie, how does health insurance fit into that picture?
Yeah, well, very fortunately, access now to health insurance should no longer be a barrier as part of reentry. So I think that's great, right? It's one less thing that distinguishes somebody who's coming out of a correctional facility from their neighbors, from their peers. In states, at least, that have expanded Medicaid, everybody really has access to some form of health insurance. So we know from studies and research that the first 2 weeks after release from a Department of Corrections facility are really the most critical. So it's important for advocates, criminal justice personnel, and everybody to really kind of focus in on that initial release and think about what planning can be done while somebody is still within a DOC facility. I think the first step to that is really understanding what type of Medicaid is available in different states. Are you operating in a fee-for-service area? Do you have Medicaid managed care? And then really kind of trying to bring together Department of Corrections officials and Medicaid agency officials to talk about how to really make sure that the continuity of care for folks is pretty seamless. So of course, there's lots of things you can do here. You can do enrollment before release. You can do enrollment with people on parole. You can have enrollment specialists in parole offices. You can do trainings for parole agents, for probation officers to really make sure that they understand. But there's a real chance here to kind of bring everybody together and make sure that when somebody is walking out of a Department of Corrections facility, they've got their Medicaid card in hand. So if they've been on a certain drug regime or certain drug treatments or been going through mental health, counseling, that's something that they should be able to do also in the community just as easily.
Thanks, Jennie. Katy, I think we have you back.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what happened there.
It's okay. It's the beauty of these things. It's all right. So I want to give you a chance, though, to finish talking about sentencing. I think where I lost you anyway, you had just sort of finished talking about maybe the ACT Court, and we're going to talk about some other pieces of sentencing or the other opportunities at sentencing.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll just jump into the discussion about bridge funding, because I think that's one of the really neat decisions that Cook County has made with the ACT Court, which was so prior to Medicaid expansion, the county was spending an inordinate amount of money on medical treatment as well as behavioral health care for individuals who did not have any type of health insurance. After Medicaid expansion, many of those funds have been reinvested in other very important services that are not reimbursable under Medicaid. So housing support, case management is extremely critical for individuals who, especially those who are just starting to understand the way to use their health insurance. Having a case management system set up for those individuals, case managers who understand both the justice system and the healthcare system, really, really critical at this kind of the inception of the ACA. Transit support was another big one. Other incentives for complying with the program. So I strongly encourage, if your jurisdiction has been using funds for now Medicaid reimbursable services, don't divert those funds to something that won't support your clients. Definitely advocate for those funds to be reinvested in other justice-related services. A final piece that's been really important to the ACT Court has been collaborating with local health law and behavioral health experts to kind of bring the whole justice system up to speed. So not just the clients. The clients have a steep learning curve in trying to understand how to access healthcare, but often the justice practitioners do as well. And in fact, the ACT Court partnered with Jennie, Sutcliffe, and Shriver to train over half of the Cook County Adult Probation Department in Medicaid enrollment and just understanding kind of Medicaid 101. That was a big help.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a two groups that I think often don't intersect. So I could see there'd be a lot of room for education on both sides. We have a question that's come in from Hannah. Hannah is with the Department of Corrections in Kentucky, and her question is to clarify, Sarah, the point that you were making about Medicaid coverage. And so her question is, she was asking if she heard that Medicaid could cover medical visits when someone has to go to the hospital when they're incarcerated. I know normally the state covers that, so she was wondering if she had heard that wrong. Sarah, is there any sort of state-by-state difference here?
Well, the difference may depend on, first of all, there's a couple variables that can play into it.
Sarah, your audio is acting up again. I wonder if you could jump off and jump back on like you did beforehand. That helped. And Hannah, we'll hold your question. We will come back to that because it's a good question. I want to give Sarah a chance to clarify that. Jennie, this is a question that sort of was burning in me the whole time I was reading your article, and I wonder if our viewers feel the same. I'm wondering, whom you see doing this work, because it does intersect these worlds that don't often interact, and it's not, I think, a typical part of the process yet. Hopefully it is going to be. Is this territory for public defenders? Is this civil legal aid territory? Is this just for healthcare advocates? Who do you see doing this work?
I think the answer is everybody. I think that what we've seen in a lot of different jurisdictions around the country is that you need a strong champion to really kind of push this forward, but that champion can be anybody. In some jurisdictions, it's been the Medicaid director. In Rhode Island, for example, she spearheaded all of this. In some jurisdictions, it can be in Rockford, Illinois, for example, a judge brought everybody together and said, in my courtroom, Medicaid's going to be really important for us. In some places, you've got folks like Appleseed and Katy who've really driven, thinking about this and making it community-based treatment within a specific specialty court. You can have, I did this work also formerly in the governor's office in Illinois. So I think that, it's really everybody's involved here. And as you kind of mentioned, it's two systems that don't typically really work together, but there's a lot of real positive, a lot of opportunity for really positive change on everybody's side here. So it's really a matter of, when you're starting to do this work, trying to find somebody who can really be a champion and really moving the ball forward, and someone who's a good collaborator and can bring together unlikely partners and unusual suspects to sort of work on these things.
Thank you. Sarah, you're back, and hopefully not sounding like a robot anymore. So I want to return to Hannah's question, not only because I love it when people from Kentucky write in, because that's my home state, but also because it's a really good question. So Sarah, let's see how your sound is now.
Is that better?
Much better, yes. Okay.
Anyway, so that's an important question. There's a couple variables that can come into play. One is whether your state has chosen to suspend eligibility for people who are incarcerated versus terminating it. If people aren't eligible for Medicaid, then they're not going to be able to have those services covered. There are some kinds of, most kinds of inpatient hospital services are covered under Medicaid. There are some limited circumstances, like inpatient psych for adults, that may not be covered. And so that may be the difference. If you really, this is a deep and thorny area, and some states have really been pioneers in this, and there's guidance from CMS. So people who want to get deeper into that aspect of it, please email me. I should have put my email on my thingy there, but I didn't. It's SOMERS@healthlaw, all one word, .org. And I think my contact information is on the article and stuff like that. So please feel free, people, to get in touch with me if you want to get more into that.
Thank you, Sarah. And I will add that in the follow-up email that everyone who registered gets that has a link to your article and a link to the recording of today's conversation, we'll also put your contact information in there. That's part of why we do these. We want people to be able to get to you with their questions if they want to pursue work like this. We are nearing the end of our time, but we had another question come in before our conversation. I want to be sure to get to it. It came from Mary Helen in Syracuse. She said she's concerned about the needs of aging prisoners. Given long sentences, prisoners are aging, and increasingly they need more intensive health care. Does the Affordable Care Act help address those needs at all? And what about issues for aging seniors who are being released? And they may have difficulty finding long-term care on the outside, especially if sex offenders. Katy, I will turn this one to you.
Thanks. Yeah, so as I think it's been mentioned a couple times today, the ACA incentivizes all states to treat any prisoners, but especially I think aging prisoners outside of penal institutions. We experienced this in the ACT Court firsthand. The average ACT Court participant was close to 50 years old, and for many, if not most, the sentence to the ACT Court was the first time they've received probation in their life. And so one of the things to keep in mind with an older population is, one, they may have a history, they may have no history with the healthcare system. They also may have a negative history with that healthcare system. So again, providing a lot of support with how to access care, how to navigate health insurance generally, which we found came best through case management and training probation officers to do that. Another thing advocates can do who aren't working directly with clients is to really try to move the bar on disqualifying criminal history. The vast, over 90%, I think in our article says, of individuals in the country are not eligible for drug courts because of disqualifying criminal history. With an aging prison population, this is a major concern. What we don't want is for folks who are released from prison who may have another run-in with the law to then be prohibited from getting care in the community simply because of something that happened when they were much younger. So you can advocate for that at the legislative level. You can advocate that if you're a public defender, you want to put treatment on the table in any negotiation over sentencing. And if you're a judge or you have access to judges, certainly encourage them to use their discretion to treat older individuals in the community. And a final point is just that healthcare is just one piece of the bigger puzzle for older individuals, and one of the things we worked on in the ACT Court is to help people access Social Security insurance if they had been employed, Social Security disability if they qualified for that. Transit support may be available at no cost, as it was in Chicago, to older individuals, supportive housing, making health insurance a piece of a bigger wraparound package for those individuals.
Thank you, Katy. Sarah, did you have something you wanted to add?
Just very briefly, as far as Medicaid treatment is concerned, there is no barrier related to being a sex offender. Medicaid eligibility is about whether you fit into a category and what your income is. So, that's another way to look at it as well. That there should not, and that if a state covers a service like long-term care or substance use service, then if you fit the eligibility category, you're entitled to it. So just keep that in mind as well.
Great. Our time is running out, but we do have one question I think that can be quickly answered. This comes from Robin, and she asks, does Medicaid cover case management in any states?
Case management is covered for Medicaid beneficiaries under age 21 in all states, or it should be. Whether it's actually available is another question. It's less frequently covered for adults. It's what's known as an optional Medicaid service, but in some states it's covered, and it can be part of what are called home and community-based waivers for people who need the level of care provided in an institution. So to go back to our aging population example, if somebody's eligible for nursing facility care and they can get into a waiver program in the community, they could probably get case management. But again, if you want to get deeper into that, feel free to email me.
Sounds great. All right, well, I want to thank all of our viewers today, and I want to thank Jennie, Katy, and Sarah for being with us. I also want to remind everyone you can check out their article, Unlocking the Affordable Care Act's Potential for Justice-Involved Individuals. You can find that at povertylaw.org/clearinghouse. And there's a lot more in that article than what we were able to touch on today, in particular tips for advocates and what you can do. I'll invite you to join our mailing list at povertylaw.org/join, and you can also follow the Shriver Center on LinkedIn. While I have you here, let me invite you to return next month for our Advocacy Exchange. We'll be talking next month with advocates from the Nebraska Appleseed Center for Law in the Public Interest, and we will talk about state options for expanding access to education in TANF programs. It should be an interesting topic. That will be on Thursday, October 20th, same time as today's broadcast, 1 o'clock Eastern and 10 o'clock Pacific. And I'll thank everyone once again and remind you that until we see you again next month, that you are not alone out there doing this work. Thanks so much.